if they don't get their act together in the next, few months or year, then I think the prospects of the Liberal Party surviving are pretty dim, you'd have to say.
One for Mum, one for Dad, and one for the country.
And there has never been a more exciting time to be an Australian.
Budgets are about choices, Fran, and you show what you value through the choices you make.
This is coal. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared. The Treasurer knows.
I want an economy that works for people, not the other way around.
We'll just end up being a third-rate economy, a banana republic.
Just follow the money.
G'day, and welcome to Follow the Money, the Australia Institute's podcast that explains economics, politics and policy in plain English. I'm your host, Ebony Bennett. At the 2025 federal election, the Liberal Party achieved its worst result in modern history, and things have only gotten worse from there.
Well, tonight's not the night that we wanted for the Liberal Party or for our coalition or indeed for our country.
When you look at the complete lack of policy that was being able to be talked about by candidates.
And if these three senators could not be accepted, then our coalition has become untenable.
I will be spending the next couple of weeks thanking the amazing people of Farrer. Shortly thereafter, I will be tendering my resignation to the Speaker.
It is clear we are running out of time. I won't mince words. The Liberal Party is in the worst position that it has been since it was founded in 1944.
Two leaders, an on-again, off-again relationship with the Nationals, and its polling numbers are tanking. But is this decline temporary or terminal? This week, we're bringing you a conversation with journalist and author Niki Savva, recorded live in Canberra at our Politics in the Pub event on Wednesday, the 18th of February. Niki is an acclaimed political writer, a former staffer for Peter Costello and John Howard, and the author of the new book Earthquake, The Election That Shook Australia. Niki was joined on stage by Australia Institute co-CEO Dr. Richard Dennis and Chief Political Analyst Amy Remeikis. They discussed the origins of this Liberal Party crisis, whether a Liberal national coalition is viable in contemporary Australia, and what this all means for Australian democracy.
Let's open tonight with probably the most obvious question. Niki, I'll start with you. What the fuck is going on with the Liberal Party?
Well, I think I could use that F-bomb to describe the state they're in, right? Obviously, they're in a very parlous situation. They've had two catastrophic election defeats. They were facing a third. They still are facing a third. And if they don't get their act together in the next, few months or year, then I think the prospects of the Liberal Party surviving are pretty dim, you'd have to say. They've hemorrhaged support from the left. They lost their heartland at the 2022 election. They did nothing to try to win back those votes. They thought that they were going to pick up seats in suburban and outer urban areas, and they failed miserably there. So I think the situation that they're in, which I keep saying is on the brink of extinction, is something that's been brewing for quite a while. It didn't just happen in 25, and it was going apace in the lead up to the 22 election. And I think the reason for that is that people no longer knew what the Liberal Party stood for. They still don't know what the Liberal Party stands for, and the party has reached the point where it no longer thinks or speaks or looks or acts like modern Australia. And in fact, sometimes you get the impression that they don't really like what modern Australia has become. So until they can find a way to accept what it is, to try and live with it, and maybe make it better, because there is always room for improvement, rather than change it back to what it was in the 50s, then I think they're in really deep doo-doo.
And Niki, I'll get your opinion on this, but first to Richard. Is Angus Taylor the man to drag them out of that abyss?
No. But that's not on Angus. Like, I don't think a man can drag them out of the abyss. I think a woman might have been able to drag them out of the abyss, but they've literally just rejected that idea. So just briefly, I agree with everything Niki just said. I'd just go back one election to what we thought, what was called the miracle election of 2019. I actually think that was the curse. Because don't forget, in 2019, that's when Tony Abbott lost his seat. One of the bluest of blue ribbon seats. He lost that seat in 2019, and the Labor vote went through the roof in, see if these names stick out for you, Goldstein, Kooyong, Wentworth, North Sydney. When communist Bill Shorten waged class war, winners write history. Winners write history. So Morrison wrote history. What happened in 2019 when Bill Shorten proposed capital gains tax reform and negative gearing reform and franking credit reform, the highest income electorates in Australia swung hard to Labor. And in 2019, Josh Frydenberg's margin went from 12 point something to 6 point something. Then he lost it in 2022. So in 2019, they didn't course correct. They won, though. And then in 2022, they didn't course correct, but they lost. And then they didn't course correct after 2025. So they keep making the same bad decisions. You know, the whole, definition of stupidity, doing the same thing again and expecting a different outcome. Finally, they elected a female leader, tried to do some moderate things, got monstered for it. And she's gone now. Is Angus the man to pull them out? No, because I don't think a man can pull them out.
Well, I disagree slightly there, because I don't think Susan Lee tried to do any moderate things. For instance, on quotas. Now, the Liberal Party's support among women especially has been declining. Their representation in Parliament has been declining. They keep saying they're going on recruitment drives for women, which never actually produce any results. So you would think that at this point, where nothing else has worked, that maybe quotas might be worth a go. Instead, what we heard from Susan Lee was this rather, I thought it was BS, statement that she was a zealot for getting women into Parliament, but agnostic on quotas. So that was, I thought that was a ridiculous position for her. The thing is that the right never liked, never respected, and never trusted Susan Lee. That was obvious to me when I was interviewing people for the book, for Earthquake. They thought that she and her office were leaking sensitive information to the media. They thought that she was canvassing votes for the leadership ahead of the election, which she was, and that she was appearing in electorates where she thought the incumbents would support her afterwards. So when it came time for the vote, I don't think there was any great enthusiasm for electing Susan Lee as someone who might, restore integrity to the system or perhaps strike out in different directions. And if Angus Taylor had not run on a joint ticket with Jacinta Nampijinpa Price, he would have won that ballot and Susan Lee would not.
I mean, I don't think you're taking into account Ted O'Brien's view on that. which was that it's kind of the voters' fault because they put a bunch of women in seats and then the voters didn't vote for them. So it's not actually the Liberal Party's fault that they will only have, I think it's like 5 women in the House of Representatives because you guys just didn't vote for their candidates. How dare you? But on that point of moderates, like Richard, can we say that there's any moderates left in the modern Liberal Parliamentary Party? And if so, are they actually allowed to have any power?
Yeah, look, I'd be interested in Niki's answer on that. From what I can see, no, not at all. But that's kind of one of the problems that both major parties, as if the Liberals still are, both major parties have now got themselves into a bind. If there was a moderate in the Liberal Party, they wouldn't be allowed to tell me. They wouldn't be allowed to speak to voters and say, no, I like the Liberal Party. We disagree on some things. Here's where I'm... Like the sort of disunity is death has so taken hold of the major parties that they all speak with kind of the same talking points. And that kind of leads to the bizarre situation where Penny Wong had to oppose same-sex marriage for years before she was allowed to support it, or where Fatima Payman is kicked out for, crossing the floor. Now, the Liberals don't kick you out for crossing the floor, but I don't think that being actually moderate is much of a career trajectory for most Liberals. So if they did think it, they're not saying it. And, once upon a time, MPs had power outside of Parliament, either a branch that would back them or an electorate that would back them, and they could take that power into Canberra with them. But when you get your power from the party, you can't actually criticise the party without risking what for you is everything, that is, your seat. So, look, no, I mean, I talk to more Liberals than people might assume, but they haven't been sounding very moderate for a long time to me.
I think the moderates are gutless. The thing, that I've noticed over the past few years is that the right gets out there and fights and fights and fights until they get what they want. And they never give up until they get what they want. Whereas the moderates sit there and say, oh, we can't go out there and cause any trouble because, people won't like us.
Which is kind of like gentle parenting a toddler. Where you're just like, we're just going to allow you to have these big feelings and we'll talk about it later in private while the tantrum gets bigger and bigger and bigger because you've said that they can't have their second ice cream bar for breakfast, for example.
But they never went out and fought for what they believed in. Susan Lee never went out and fought for what she supposedly believed in, like net zero. And none of the moderates made her go out there and fight for what she believed in. So she was a very passive participant in that debate. And of course, the right knew exactly what they wanted and how to get it. And they eventually got it. And the moderates acquiesced. So what is the point of them?
You talk about that in Earthquake, but in terms of like the Dutton leadership, especially around the election, that there were people who had concerns about the direction, concerns about the lack of policy, concerns about how Dutton was just kind of doing the trust me, it's going to be fine with no evidence. And the right were happy because it was pretty much the policies that they wanted, although he did make them hold the line on net zero because he had authority over the party room in a way that Susan Lee could never dream of. But that the moderates didn't do anything to push back against Peter Dutton, even as they heard from their own electorates that it was going to cost them their seat in 2025.
That's right. Like I say, they sat there and they copped it, whereas the right put up some resistance during the campaign, especially, particularly on tax. I mean, there was, a bit of a fight over whether the Liberals should go to the election matching Labor's tax cut or even, exceeding it. And both Jane Hume and Angus Taylor fought for that, as did James Paterson as did anybody else who had two brain cells to rub together, as Bob Hawke used to say, except Dutton didn't take any notice of them. As far as he was concerned, it was a piddling tax cut. It wasn't going to change any votes, and he wanted the money spent on defence. And he refuses to accept that decision in any way damaged the Liberal Party or cost them votes. And at that point, of course, they couldn't roll him.
But, I mean, Richard, he did have a tax policy that even One Nation voters agreed with, which was the gas reservation. And he was sort of broadening out, like, you know, maybe we should start taxing fossil fuel in a way that was, I thought, quite different for a Conservative leader in this country.
Oh, look, absolutely. I mean, you know, to be clear, I thought Peter Dutton was a very good opposition leader who would never become Prime Minister. And by very good, he held the job. It's a tough job, opposition leader straight after an election. Like 6 weeks, 6 months out, most people probably thought he won't go the distance. But his logic the whole time was the only way to be Prime Minister is to stay opposition leader, so I'll do anything I can to stay opposition leader, which meant didn't have any of the big policy fights that he needed to have to actually fix up, you know, the Liberals. So coming into the election, yeah, he threw some weird crap around, and some of it was, a reservation policy and an export gas policy. Export tax on gas. And we did polling on it during the election campaign, and we knew that Dutton saying it would be controversial. So when we polled 1,000 people, we asked them who they were intending to vote for first, as you do, and then the ones that said they were voting Liberal or Conservative, we said, Peter Dutton's proposed a tax on export gas. What do you think of that? 71% support. 71% of Conservative voters thought taxing gas exports was a great idea. And then for the people that said they were voting Labor Green, we said, Adam Bandt wants to put an export gas tax on. What do you think of that? 70% support. But if we had have said to the Conservative voters Adam Bandt liked it, guess what? They would have hated it likewise. So that's why we split it up. And, you know, so again, Dutton was on a winner with his base saying, hey, nationalists who don't like foreign companies, how about we put a tax on gas exports? His voters loved it. And yeah, just today we've got polling out showing that I think 80% of One Nation voters think we should have a tax on gas exports. So, you know.
Doesn't that worry you?
No. No, it's fantastic. And this is where the whole kind of left-right stuff, I think, does the major parties a big problem, a disservice at the moment. Straight after the voice was lost, from my point of view, it was lost, the proposal was lost, we surveyed people and asked them whether they wanted laws to promote truth in political advertising. Again, 90% support. That surprised everybody until I pointed out, the yes voters thought the no campaign lied. The no voters thought the yes campaign lied, but they all agreed that better rules would be good. So, a whole bunch of One Nation voters want to tax gas exports for one reason, and a whole bunch of Greens want to tax gas exports for another reason. But Parliament makes laws. It doesn't have feelings, right? It's okay for me that One Nation and Green and Labor and Liberal voters all think these things. So, Dutton got himself in all sorts of mess during the election. I think the decision to oppose the tax cuts. I mean, I remember laughing when I heard it. I couldn't believe it.
Is that as an economist or as a person?
Oh, no, as an economist, I don't care. They are meaningless tax cuts. I'd rather spend the money on services. But for the Liberal Party in the heat of an election campaign to oppose a tax cut, I just thought, you guys have lost the plot. And they had. But then he was chucking all these other weird ideas. You know, there was the petrol stuff and gas tax. So they kind of done all this sort of half-baked policy work that once upon a time you would have thought a minor party did. You know, but here was the Liberals doing it.
Well, one of the problems was that there was no trust between Dutton's office and his shadow ministry. And that gas policy that you talked about was cooked up literally in the last couple of days before the budget without the input of the shadow minister. It was done in Dutton's office. There had been no consultation with industry or any outside group, and it was literally just presented to Susan McDonald, and she was told, this is the gas policy, you go out there and sell it. And the same thing happened with Andrew Hastie on defence. The policies, this is, what I was told and what I wrote in the book. His chief of staff organised a meeting of Dutton's most senior advisors and said to them, we can't trust the shadow ministers to come up with the policies because they're not very good. So we have to do them. We have to work them up in the office. And by the way, you're not allowed to tell the shadow ministers that you're doing this. So there was a very secretive operation, a very paranoid operation. They cooked up all these policies and then they literally gave them to shadow ministers the day before they were due to be announced and said, go out and sell this.
What could go wrong?
Well, as James Patterson said later when he was asked what went wrong with the campaign, he said, everything. So that's exactly what happened.
Now, I've heard Angus Taylor described as the most articulate, best educated idiot you will ever meet. And that's among his colleagues. So we're seeing a bit of a rebranding of Angus Taylor where he's being described in conservative media circles as a political outsider. And it's obvious that they're trying to match up Angus Taylor with One Nation and at least, allow a bit of a thruppleition there that makes a little bit more sense. It's thruple and lition. Thank you. I'm very proud of it.
I like it. That's good.
Yeah, thank you. But is there an appetite to push back from One Nation within the modern Liberal Party, given that One Nation is cannibalising their votes, and you would think that on the numbers, working with One Nation won't actually save Liberal or National seats. It'll cost them Liberal and National seats. And is Angus Taylor a political outsider who is going to be able to sell the Liberals' message for the rest of this year?
I would never describe him as an outsider. As to the other point about One Nation, I think one of the really big problems now, and also that existed between 22 and 25, was that Dutton gave the National Party absolutely everything they wanted. And they went further and further to the right, and it worked brilliantly for the National Party, but it was killing the Liberal Party. And I thought when they split the first time, they should have stayed apart. So that would give the Liberals a bit of time to maybe put a bit of separation between themselves and the National Party and to try and get back to that centre ground. So we have another split, and then there's a huge rush to get back together again, which was also another huge mistake. So the longer that the Liberal Party is tied to the National Party, the less I think they will be able to counter One Nation, the more they will be drawn into that vortex when they really should be moving closer to the centre and separating from One Nation and actually aggressively challenging One Nation and every racist, bigoted statement that they make.
Richard, do you see that happening?
No. But can I ask Niki a question? Is that cheeky?
If she's got enough voice, sure.
Okay. So a little bit of setup. So a couple of lifetimes ago, I was Natasha Stott-Despoja's chief of staff. So anyone remember the Democrats? That's how long ago it was, right? And when I was working for the Democrats, they were in balance of power. So, I had quite a number of meetings with, John Howard and a couple with Peter Costello. I don't know if you were working for him at the time. Anyway, it used to have a lot of dealings with the Howard ministry. And it was pretty clear to me in those days, both as an outsider and in negotiations with them, that the kind of compact, again, you were in the inside, I wasn't, but the compact was kind of that the Liberals were in charge of the kind main meta messaging, the broadcast message of what the coalition was on about. And the Nationals just quietly got given far too much money for pet projects to shut them up. No, but that was kind of the compact, okay? So you got National Party MPs representing low-income electorates voting for tax cuts for rich people, welfare cuts for poor people, subsidies for private schools they don't go to, subsidies for private health insurance they don't have. In exchange for that, the Nats got their names on bridges and halls and you name it. But it worked pretty well. But it was clear to me that the deal was you don't kind of brag about how much cash we give you to win your votes. But once Sky TV comes along, once social media comes along, once One Nation comes along, that compact doesn't seem to make sense anymore. Because the One Nation is saying, well, I'll say the crazy stuff they don't let the Nats say. I'll pick the culture wars the Nats aren't allowed to have, because the price for the Nats of the pork barrelling was to shut up about the stuff that hurt the libs in the city. So that's a simplification, but I guess my question to you, Niki, is now that Sky TV will take the most bellicose voice it can find, broadcast that message, is it possible for the Nats to be in coalition with the Libs when the Libs are worried about losing seats to Teals and the Nats are worried about losing seats to One Nation? Like, they used to be able to buy each other's silence, but now their silence is deadly for both of them.
Well, this is, the ongoing dilemma and conundrum, now for the Liberal Party and where it goes. And so far, they have done absolutely nothing to win back any of the Teal seats. Okay, Tim Wilson managed to retain Goldstein, but that was a very tricky kind of campaign anyway. He had a lot of support from coal interests, etc. So, and I don't think that the Liberal Party has kind of resolved that identity crisis about where they want to position themselves. Is it going to be a further right of centre party or a closer to the centre right party? And I think there will be a civil war going on inside the Liberal Party about how to resolve that. And I also don't believe that these problems, just because there's been a leadership change, are resolved or are going to be resolved, because there is so much that they disagree on, so much that they will never agree on, that to me, the whole thing seems untenable and unstable. And I don't believe the convulsions are over. And when they are over, I don't know what will emerge from that, whether it is, a far-right party along the lines of reform in the UK, for instance. There are people in both the National Party and the Liberal Party who think that something like that is possible. They don't discount the possibility that the Liberal Party will split, and one part of the Liberal Party will go towards the Nationals and One Nation, and the other part of the Liberal Party, I think, oblivion, because I don't see, there is no other party that they can align with. People think, oh, well, maybe they will join up with the Teals. Well, the Teals don't want to be a party. The Teals want to remain independents because that's part of their magic. and they don't want, apparatchiks telling them what to do, what to say, stick to the talking points, whatever. They love doing what they do the way they do it. And so I think it's still going to be a very, very difficult road ahead for the Liberal Party.
At the end of this week, Anthony Albanese will become the longest-serving Prime Minister since John Howard. So he'll eclipse Scott Morrison's record. I think it's on Thursday. And on Friday, he becomes the longest-serving since John Howard. We can assume, given that the coalition would have to win, I think it's 28 seats, or 29 without Barnaby, that they are going to lose the next election. On the maths, it is highly unlikely that the coalition can win 28 seats in one election cycle. This is not Queensland. Queensland is a moody bitch. The country is not as moody as Queensland. So whenever somebody says to me, oh, but, Campbell Newman, it's not the same thing. Imagine like your insane cousins, like that, fifth branch of the family, like how they deal with your barbecue and when they all get annoyed over whether or not the sausages were cooked properly, they'll all turn together, but they won't hold on any other issue. That's Queensland. It's not the entire country. So we can probably project that Anthony Albanese, short of being taken out by his own party, will win another term and lead. And then we're getting into, Fraser Hawke territory of time served in office. There are many, including within the Labor caucus, who quietly talk about how Labor is filling that centre-right position. And people within Labor are telling me that they're already looking at Forrest as a seat that they could potentially win, Latrobe, Goldstein, and Longman. And that's just right now in this Rutgers. They are taking a look at other suburban and outer suburban seats that are currently held by the coalition, as well as whether there's any inner city seats that they could potentially take, like, Tim Wilson and Goldstein. So, Richard, what happens to politics in Australia with a Liberal Party that is, flirting with One Nation for voters by going further out to the right?
I think, unfortunately, the kind of rational strategy for Paul Erickson and Albo is to, shift a bit to the right. Just if the Libs are going to sort of vacate terrain or are too chaotic to hold the terrain, why wouldn't you try to move into it? That's sort of politics 101. So what Labor's betting is that it can kind of cross that river and hold terrain on the other side while not losing anything or much on its left flank. Now, I think that's the risk for Labor. That's the risk for the left of Labor, because if you look at sort of factionally where Labor sort of seats are, it's left MPs who are more vulnerable if Labor moves too far to the right. I don't think that you'd think that Tanya Plibersek's seat is safe after she resigns. But once upon a time, someone would have spent 20 years preparing to win that safe seat. So, I think it makes sense for Albo to do that in some sense. I think if he loses some seats on the left, I don't think he'll be too fussed about that. He would see kind of smiting the Liberals as the bigger opportunity. For me, as a citizen and someone who's interested in progressive policy, I just think that's a huge disappointment and waste of time because the Liberals will smite themselves. They don't need a lot of help in the smiting stakes. And what we could be doing is actually fixing a whole bunch of big structural problems that we put off for decades, where the excuse for not fixing it was, but the Liberals. Yeah, I agree with you, but the Liberals. Well, now if anyone says, but the Liberals, just roll your eyes and walk away. So I think there's a real tension between a Labor government, which is bigger than the Prime Minister, a Labor government and a Labor movement that can see an historic opportunity to get some big shit done versus a Labor Party that thinks, hang on, we can sweep the board. I mean, this isn't a prediction, but have a look at the polls in South Australia. The South Australian state election coming up, the Liberals might not win a seat. A seat. Now, I'm not saying they won't win any, but I'm saying on today's numbers, you'd be hard-pressed to find it. So, I think, there's I don't know if this is Shakespearean or something, but boy, there's a big test for our Prime Minister. Is he there to actually really change the country, in an unstoppably successful, politically popular way? Or is he going to get some good royal smiting in of the libs by not doing much, but just smothering any green shoots that appear for them? Because both make sense. But one would reshape the country and one would maybe help him write a record for how long he was in there. Whitlam wasn't there for long, right? We're still talking about what he got done. And here we are 50 years later going, oh, yeah, it takes a good 4 terms to get anything done, Richard. So, yeah, we'll see. Both make sense. The question for me is, what's he really want to do?
We know that the South Australian Liberals are, to put it kindly, which I don't often do, struggling. Jess Wilson has to be, and Victoria has to sort of be looking at the cozying up to One Nation and just sort of looking at her chances of winning the Victorian election getting further and further away, given how we know that most of Victoria votes. And there is that big regional divide, that regional and city divide about where One Nation supporters are. You've currently, got absolutely nothing happening in Western Australia. The Liberals are not a chance in Western Australia. They are holding the Northern Territory, but the Northern Territory does seem to split. They're nowhere to be seen in the ACT. They're in Queensland, but Queensland, on history will probably turf them out after, another term or so. And in Tasmania, Labor keeps refusing power. So the Liberals kind of get it by default because Labor refuses to negotiate on it. So you've got all of the states starting to crumble, as well as now the federal sphere. So how long until Andrew Hastie comes along and decides, yes, thank you, I'm going to start taking this in a completely new direction?
Well, I think it's possible, but I think they will have to give Angus Taylor time to show if he can put a floor under their vote and perhaps make a bit of headway. And if he can do that, then I think he will buy himself some time. And what might help him is what Richard was saying before about Albanese and how brave he is prepared to be. And I think the budget will be an indication of that. I mean, if it's another steady as she goes budget without any kind of bold reforms, without tackling tax changes, particularly on capital gains tax and various other things, then I think people will start to question, quite rightly, what is the point of Albanese? Why is he there? It's not good enough just to be there and just to present a steady as she goes, warming the seat kind of government. They are there to change things and to change things for the better. And if he doesn't seize that opportunity in May, I think there will be the start of a lot of grumbling about him and about his leadership. And as someone who wrote recently that he should probably wait until after he's past Keating's time as Prime Minister, because they all count up the days, How long have I been here compared to Keating, compared to Morris?
I've known staffers who have gone to correct the Wikipedia record of how close they are. That's how closely they monitor it.
It is. It's a real thing amongst PMs and treasurers anyway. I think when he reaches that point, he should do the right thing. He's had a wonderful run, and if he really wants the Labor Party to be the party of natural government, then he should leave and allow it to regenerate.
That's where we'll leave this conversation with Niki Savva, Richard Dennis and Amy Ramakis. Thanks so much for joining us this week. The latest Vantage Point essay, What We Owe the Water, It's Time for a Fossil Fuel Treaty, is available now from Australia Institute Press. You can buy this edition for $19.95, or pod listeners can use the code PODVP, that's PODVP, at checkout to get free shipping. And if one edition isn't enough, you can subscribe to the Vantage Point series. It's big ideas in small packages. For just $64.95, you'll get 4 engaging essays a year on some of the most pressing issues facing Australia and the world from some of the best thinkers in the world. Visit australiainstitute.org.au/store or follow the link in the show notes to order now. Our theme music is by Jonathan McPeak from Pulse and Thrum, with additional music from Blue Dot Sessions. I'm your host, Ebony Bennett. Thanks for listening.